All right, friends, we're going to start. Ready or not, here we come. The Lord be with you.
Ready or not, here he comes.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for this
Just to
day.
minimize.
We give you thanks for this gathering. Be with us. Open our hearts, our minds, our spirit. Help us to speak the truth to one another, but always in love about where you would have us go, where the ministries of this church should be, both in this place and in our neighborhood and in the wider world. Help us be faithful and bold and courageous, all in your Son's name. Amen. Okay, please take a seat. So this is, I figured like there's no time like the present to get started, right? And even though I'm not installed, you still have a week, I guess, to figure out whether you want to have second thoughts or not. But I'm going to just go ahead because we've had some interesting conversations, the council and I. At our August meeting, I conducted a poll, a thought experiment, really, and I listed about a dozen ministries that you have here, ministries that are pretty common at churches, and I said it would help me a lot as your pastor to know where you think we and where you think I should be devoting most of my time, most of our time and energy in the next year. Recognizing that churches are always at different places, and it is not to say that all ministries aren't important. Of course they are. The question is prioritizing. Where should we put our energies first? And so we did this poll, and it was sort of anonymous, although then we talked about it. We sort of knew who said what. And some of it was surprising to me. Some of it wasn't surprising at all. But I just wanted to share with you to start the conversation what the council felt our top 5 priorities ought to be. And I think I'm speaking for them when I say this is preliminary. We want to hear, because the ministry of Holy Trinity, and you'll hear me say this 100 times, if once, the ministry of Holy Trinity is not the pastor's ministry, God help us. It's not the council's ministry. It is the ministry of all the baptized. It is your ministry. And so we want to know what you think. And the council and I are going to go on a retreat in late October up to Camp Calumet, and I'm dying to go because I've never been there to see what a Lutheran camp looks like. And we're going to talk about this. So we want to hear what you have to say so we can begin to process it. So these were the 5 priorities that the council preliminarily identified. Worship, that is, enhancing our worshiping experience. And that's everything from preaching to sacrament, to our prayer life, to the participation of people in worship, readers, greeters, ushers, acolytes, liturgical deacons, all of it, our music program, our choir, all of that. Everything that happens in here Sunday morning is sort of enhancing it, making it, not that it isn't really good and vibrant now, but we can always be better. So that's one thing. And particularly since we're still sort of coming out of COVID, right? And you're coming out of an interim period, and you've had different pastors, and so it's sort of, it's an opportunity for us to sort of take our worshiping experience, make some decisions about what it should look like, and then really run with it. I'm excited about that. Family youth ministry. Every church that I know is concerned about this because all of us want this. And so this did and didn't surprise me that was on the list. But it's something I do think we need to be realistic about what we can do. Because so much of this is setting expectations properly. You had a pastor before me who had the profile of somebody who was very talented by everything I can see at attracting young people with families. And so the demographics are such that we're competing with a world where soccer games are happening on Sunday morning, other things are happening on Sunday morning, fewer and fewer families are churched and all the rest of it. And so we just need to be realistic about it, but I understand why it's here. Adult education, just speaking personally, this is sort of one of my passions and loves, and so I was delighted to see that something that you care about. And you've had some wonderful leaders in your congregation in the past who have done this, and in keeping with what I said at the outset, this is not about me standing up here and teaching. I'm happy to do that from time to time. It's about sort of marshaling all the talent that you have in this room and beyond and bringing it in here so that we can all learn. I think that Christian formation, I think this is vitally important, so I'm glad that's on the list. Pastoral care, and I put community life too, because I think when we were talking about this is not just, don't think of it narrowly as just taking care of the sick and the dying and people in distress. That's vitally important. But it really includes more broadly our relationships with each other, the community life. I think it includes all of that. Some of this, a very small part of it, honestly, the pastor needs to do if it's sacramental in nature and somebody wants a sacramental presence in the hospital or by the bedside. But most of this, again, can be done by everybody. And I'm eager for this to become a shared ministry of the entire congregation. And then finally, and I had to put it in an order, but I'm not saying, and this was the order that the council listed it in, but this is an open conversation. You can order it any way you want, and you can add to it and subtract from it. But the last one that we talked about was the combination of stewardship and membership, meaning we need to be a financially sustainable church in order to do everything else. We need to be. And you'll find that I'm perfectly happy, willing, and I think it's theologically important to talk about money, because Jesus talked about money a lot. He talked about it today in the sermon, if you were listening, in the gospel text. So stewardship, how to become better stewards. And when I say that, it's not just money, by the way. It's being good stewards of everything we've been given, and that includes our creation. It includes sort of all the gifts and treasures that we have, being better stewards of it, and then enlarging our stewardship community by recruiting new members and trying to get, again, setting realistic expectations about what we can do, but nevertheless, we're called to proclaim the gospel to the world. That's what Jesus says, and to evangelize, to go out and teach and baptize, and that's, so I'm glad that's on the list too, because I know it was dear to his heart. So there you go. End of me talking. I want to hear from you, and the council wants to hear from you. And I invite any council member who's here to clarify or correct anything that I've said. But I invite, the floor is open, and please, we are recording this, so if you want to say something, you have to. It's not optional. You have to take a mic, and Franklin has the mic. Hands. Okay, we're done. Joe, Mike's coming to you, Joe. I appreciate your patience.
I appreciate the work and the thought that's gone into this list, and so as well as how many people are here to talk about this today. It seems to look at that list in a couple of different ways. One way, it can look very inward-looking. It's about us here. And I think it's really important for this congregation, as we know from our history, to be looking outward at opportunities and ministries and so on in our community and in our world. And I assume that the thinking is that that would be a part of each of the things that are up there. But I just want to mention it so that we're keeping it front of mind.
I'm really glad you did. I can speak to that, but I don't want to take the wind out of any council member's sails if they want to speak to that. Because I think what animated the council's listing is that they, A, believe that we have a vital, vibrant outreach and social justice ministry that's looking to the world that can be better, but that one way to sort of build the foundation that allows those ministries to flourish even more is to focus on sort of, in particular, on what we do here on Sunday morning and getting more people in here and getting the resources to have funds to do all kinds of exciting things and embodying the kind of caring community that people will want to be a part of. And again, we should never think that this has to be done sort of in order. All of it should be done at the same time. But I think the council thought that maybe this needed more attention right now. But I'm just speaking for myself now. I completely agree with you that we need to be an outward-looking congregation. And that's what Jesus says time and time and time again. Mark.
Thanks, Franklin. Yeah, my sense of this, just to kind of pick up on what you and Joe were speaking of, is that just thinking about the context in which this initial list of priorities arises out of, and so the context is a pastoral vacancy and a post-COVID period. And many of us in this room have served on council over the years. And when you're in that role, it's multifunctional, but two of them are near term. What do we need to be doing today and tomorrow in a whole variety of topics? And then, goal setting, mission orientation, aspirational things. And while I'm not on council, my guess is this list is not meant to represent, who we are today. It's not meant to be a mini mission statement. It's not any of those things. This is a more, hey, council, we're starting something new. We have a new pastor. We're coming out of COVID. What's right there on the radar screen that we need to be looking at and thinking about? Is that a fair statement as to what this is about?
I'll tell you, again, thank you for the question, because the reason I asked the council in August, the reason I polled them, is I knew that I was going to be showing up on September 11th, and I knew that I was going to have this much time each week to spend on ministry, and I knew that there were 1,000 things I could be doing, right? Because I'm hearing all kinds of people saying, I want to do this, I want to do that. And so I wanted some direction from them. I wanted to say, I'm new here. Each church is different. I want to learn, and part of what I'm going to be doing over the next several months, year, maybe more than 1 year, is learn who you are, what's important to you, what you want us to be doing so that I can more effectively serve as your pastor. And so I said, okay, in the short term, where do you want me to be devoting my energy? How much of my time should I be spending on these various things? And that's what sort of led me to this now, in the short term, until we sort of get our feet under ourselves and are sailing along a little bit. So Thank you. Joan. Um,
I'm going to have a little trouble expressing myself because I'm not sure exactly what the problem is, if it's even a problem. But I think one of the things that all of us need to do, along with the council and with you, is we've got to figure out a way for things to be a little bit more manageable. You talk about realistic expectations and the demands on families and things. In the 8 or 10 years we've been here, you know, we've watched some people who have carried like amazing programs for 20 years, like on their backs, a dozen people in this. And I think the time has come for us to figure out a division of labor where, okay, I can't do this every month, but I'll sign up for these months. Or I'm not sure, we need a new lens to look at all the things that need to be done and how people can help in the way they can help without going, oh, that job's too big, I can't do that, so I don't know what to do. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. I mean, most churches that I have been a part of, it's the same group of characters who are doing all the work. And so part of it is, especially as your numbers may go down or as generations move along, is handing the baton to the next generation and enlisting more and more help. That's one thing. The other thing is, one of the hardest things to do in a church is to let things die. You would think we would be good at that because the faith is about death and resurrection, but we're not good at it because we start ministries and then the ministry hangs around for a while. And sometimes it's just time to say, we did a really wonderful thing there, and it doesn't seem to have a lot of life anymore because the congregation's changed, and maybe it's time to do something else. Or not. You know, but you always have to be asking yourself that question. So that speaks to your feeling overwhelmed, that there's like a lot to do. Well, sometimes we need, you know, Jesus talks a lot about pruning. You remember those parables about pruning in order to make things grow? And sometimes you need to do that. And that's hard. And I have no idea what needs to be pruned and what needs to be grown. Yes, Dot.
A while back, we had house guests. We were just coming out of COVID. The house guests wanted to come to church with us on Sunday. They'd never been here before. And they noticed how different this congregation is, which made me think lots and lots about our strengths. And the woman told me, perhaps one of the reasons this congregation is so different and so strong is because you're not a neighborhood church. You come from 31 different communities. You bring those strengths in very purposefully. You don't purposefully. You don't just come on Sunday morning because it's the thing to do. You come because you have a purpose. And I think that is a strength that we can capitalize on as we are looking at these 5 areas, as we are looking at what Joan was just talking about.
Thank you. I really appreciate that too, because I think being some people say a commuter church or whatever, I think there's a real strength in that. Y'all make a big sacrifice in coming here. It's not as easy as it is for some people. There is a purposefulness to it.
I also want to encourage folks, I think most of you have computers, and Mark has done a wonderful job with Genesis. I mean, it's listing and there's openings, and you look in there and sign up. For usher, for deacon. It's part of every week. He puts that out with the tidings. There's a URL, whatever you call it, to get in there and sign up.
Glenn.
There we go.
I would like to kind of piggyback off of what Joan and Dot said, and back to that a little bit. There's a Latin term that I took Latin 50 years ago, so I don't know how to pronounce it anymore. Deus in machina? Do?
Deus ex machina.
Yeah, God in the machine.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've got all but one gear up here of the machine. Because I'm concerned about, as has been reflected by previous folks, of what's going to make this go. And it's not going to be just the pastor. It's not going to be just Mark in the office. It's going to be us. And what's the mechanism, and I hate to use that word because it sounds clinical, but what's the driving force that encourages, that nurtures and asks and supports people to do various things? What's that mechanism? Putting out an email blurb or putting out a notice in the tidings of the bulletin, that's a start. But really what it is, I think, is face-to-face connection. And there needs to be a mechanism to do that. There needs to be a way of nurturing among all of us where we can find a place that where, as God says, where we bring our gifts and our talents. As it was reminded, someone said earlier this week, and I should remember who said, but I was right behind them, is that we need to, you can do all of this fancy stuff and invitations in general, but you've got to confront people face to face. If you read the bulletin or the tidings, you know that I'm trying to get together a Earth Care or Creation Care task force. I spoke to 4 people this morning, and all are interested because I approached them. None of them had read any of this stuff.
Yep.
Because I went to them face to face. And I guess I'm wondering, I'd like to see something in there that's talking about volunteerism or a means of encouraging us and nurturing our talents as they can be in terms of service to the congregation.
Thank you. Again, I really appreciate your comments, and I have 2 quick responses. And the first one isn't intended to be smart-alecky. The Holy Spirit is the mechanism that inspires us. And you're absolutely right about face-to-face. And that's, I think, why the council put this at the top of their list, and it's why I would put this at the top of our list. If we can make Sunday morning a powerful, meaningful, holy experience in a consistent way, where the music is great, supports the liturgy, the lessons are well read, that hopefully your pastor can preach a decent sermon, we can celebrate the sacraments, we can have hospitality both before and afterwards. I think we should capitalize on the fact that on Sunday mornings we have people here, and we should do more on Sunday mornings, maybe both before and after the service, so that we're face-to-face as much as we can be. And I think when we are, things like what you described will happen. And so I think it's the Holy Spirit drawing us together in a meaningful worship experience that gets us jazzed about going out and doing God's work in the world. So thank you. Yes, next.
I just want to say what Glenn said is so true, because from working with Operation Blessing for many years, I can put in the bulletin lots of things, but if I get up and I say we need this, every time I've gotten up, one time we needed men's jackets. Well, the next week I had like 100 men's jackets. And I could put that in the bulletin all the time and that wouldn't happen. And this is the same thing with the food this past week. So I agree, we just need this face-to-face.
Thank you. We need men's sweatshirts. Shirley.
I want to bring up something that had been mentioned quite a few months ago in regard to including in our worship, and that's that other churches do, and I understand that has been done here in the past. It's nice to see people's prayer needs in the bulletin, but there are some times, and I'll be specifically personal, there are some times when I, as well as other people, could really, really benefit by being surrounded by a couple of people off to the side during communion or in the back and being prayed for.
Yeah,
I've seen that I've experienced it in other churches, and I heard it brought up here at one point. I don't know when it was, but that's more face-to-face.
yeah, no, absolutely, and that's sort of both worship and pastoral care. It brings both. And I remember talking about it because I've been a part of churches where the healing rite, the laying on of hands, is a very important part of Sunday worship. I have heard that you've had that in the past from time to time. It's something for us as a congregation to talk about, but I certainly would be open to that. And yeah, our corporate prayer life is something that we, I think, ought to discuss and think if there are better ways that we can be doing things in terms of communicating our needs to each other. There seems to be a lot of different things going on here. That's sort of my impression. There's lists in the bulletin, there are email groups, there are baskets, there's a chapel with things in it, and as a new guy, I sort of want to get my head around sort of, well, so how does this group of people want their prayers to be presented to the community? What's my responsibility as a pastor to gather them? And what's your responsibility as equal members, the priesthood of all believers who are trying to pray for each other? So I think we need to talk a little bit about that. Other comments? I want to invite you. Is there something that ought to be on this list as a priority? Joe mentioned at the outset, I think, social outreach, social justice, sort of reaching out to the world, and I think, I agree with that. But is there anything else that somebody wants to nominate or say to the council and to me? You really ought to think about making a priority. Earl and Mark.
I think one of the things that could be added to the list is that covers a lot of different things would be to add something that says, be alert to opportunities. Because I think over the years, we as a congregation have been alert to various opportunities that presented themselves to us. I'm thinking back to when we helped the Amherst Church over in Manchester area get started. Just a simple thing of helping with the food out here in the wintertime. And so just as a general summary, be alert to opportunities that come around. And I would say also that continue to support each other. I had someone visit with me here, and when they left, they said, "You really have a good support group here," and we do have a good support group. So let's keep doing that. And to what Glenn was saying about, it used to be a few years back, people didn't like to see me coming because they know that I was going to ask them to do something. And I'm not quite as aggressive anymore. But let's continue to do that. Yeah.
Would you be open to us using you in that role again?
I'd like to offer a frame around all of these, plus some of the others that have been suggested. And is, if we ask what we're going to do for each one, let's also ask, what is the church going to become? What would we like the church? What will church be in the future? Because it's not going to be what it is today. And so that's just a way of asking and offering an opportunity to experiment in worship, to experiment and try things and think about what it means when the congregation is older and more of us are dying, to think about adult education, thinking about where we want the church to go, and so on. So I just would suggest that willy-nilly, we're not the church that we're going to be in the future. We're in the most secular state in the country, unchurched state, and we're old. We're going out at a faster rate than we're bringing young people in. So this is a community that has the opportunity to show what church will be in the future if we're willing to take the risk and put in the energy. And I would add to that, it's not just our time, it's our treasure. Our talents, our treasure. We need to think about how we have enough resources going forward that we can afford to experiment and afford to make mistakes along the way.
Thank you, Mark. What you said reminded me of just one thing. When people think of the graying of the church and that we're getting older and dying, they automatically go to this, family and youth ministry. Wouldn't it be great if we got more young people in to replace us old people who are dying? And yeah, sure. There's another way to do it, though. There are a lot of old people out there who don't go to church. A lot. One way we can grow the church is, the boomer demographic is huge. And there, as you say, New Hampshire is a very secular state. Well, if we could get just 1% of those people to start coming to church with us, we'd actually be a bigger church. So you need both of those things in order to grow churches and to reach people. And it's not about how many people are in the pews. It's about spreading God's word to as many people as we can. I don't care if they go to another church. If we do our bit in sort of spreading the gospel and then they go somewhere else, that's fine. Anyway, yes. Thank you.
Hello. Just wanted to ask to consider putting on the list there more richer engagement with our Indonesian friends. Such a blessing to us. And I'm a little disappointed. I don't see any of them here. Why is that? That seems wrong to me. So I'm putting that out there for consideration to the council and to you, Pastor.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, one of the things, I was very disappointed that I couldn't go to their anniversary celebration last Sunday because I didn't learn about it until the last minute. But I told their leadership that I very much want to come to one of their worship services soon to experience it because, quite honestly, I don't know the answer to that question because I'm still learning, and I both want to hear directly from them. We've heard we are in conversation as the council and pastor with some of their needs right now. We're talking about it. But I sort of want to hear from everybody about this question. I think it's an important one because I think being an increasingly diverse and accommodating church that reaches out to new and different communities is a wonderful thing. So thank you for that. Yes, ma'am.
First off, I want to thank everybody for being so welcoming to me because I am new and I'm not a member yet, but I plan to be. But one thing that we did in Pennsylvania, and I don't know if I miss it or not, we always had greeters at every service that would come in. When you walked in that door, they shook your hand. If you're a visitor, they recognized you as such, or even a newer person, they would make sure you felt welcome. And then during the coffee hour, we had coffee hour every week down there. I don't know if you do here, but they would always take that person under their wing, make sure they were invited down to coffee hour, and then tried to introduce them around a little bit. And I do know that we picked up members that way because people felt welcome in our church.
Yeah, thank you. I know that there is a greeter ministry in this church, and again, I think that part of it is we're sort of slowly like a bear in hibernation coming out of COVID, and one of the things in this bucket that I want to do is sort of get people excited about participating in the life of the church as greeters, ushers, acolytes, readers, the whole kit and caboodle.
Sound system.
So that people, as soon as they walk in the door, feel like, we want to get to know you. Yes. Bill.
Oh,
Frank.
I'm sorry. I was still thinking about sound system. Sorry.
Maybe 40 or 50 years ago, Julie and I were much younger, and we were just embarking on our family life. And in a meeting somewhat like this in the congregation in Michigan, I made the mistake of making eye contact at a time when the chair of the meeting was looking for stewardship committee members. And that was the embarkation for me. In my first stewardship committee meeting, I knew that particular congregation had a big debt, big mortgage, and was always worried about money. And the chair of the stewardship committee said, we must never forget that time is money as well. And we need to mention that. That particular congregation had a lot of people who were not financially well off, but did take time and became involved, whether in greeting, in lecturing and deaconing and whatever, and chorus choir. And so as I look at the last 5-10 years here, our congregation financially is reasonably well off. We don't have debt. And when there's been a need for extra money, it has come forth. And yet the dilemma is we've fallen off in terms of time and talent. In particular, the Thursday morning crew. Now, I'm guilty. I haven't come to the Thursday morning crew to work on the facilities. We have lectured and things like that. But someone in terms of acolyting, in terms of greeting and other sorts of things, we need to be thinking of membership and stewardship in terms of involvement, greater involvement as individuals and face-to-face. It ties in with what a lot of people have said today.
Yeah, great. No, there are some themes running through this conversation. I really appreciate that. Generating excitement so that people want to be engaged is part of what I think we're talking about. Dick Toppin. Didn't you raise your hand, Dick? Oh.
And then I got to get back to Larson.
Oh, sorry.
While I'm doing this, I want to say once again, we have Genius on the computer. The URL is in the bulletin. It's in the tidings. All you got to do is go in there and say, this is what I'd like to do this week. Read, count, run the sound system.
I was just wanted to follow up on that last comment because I was thinking the same thing all morning. I think if there's one thing that could be kind of de-emphasized on that list, maybe is stewardship from the standpoint of money. I mean, we've been full-time members here for 10 years and part-time before that, and I can never remember anything that we needed that we couldn't afford. And then when we had special needs, like sound equipment and everything, people bought the stuff and gave it to us. That's a real blessing. I mean, when you really think about it. I mean, there's so many churches that can't pay their bills every month. Never been a problem here. And I just kind of really do believe that if we focus on those other areas and the other ones that have been talked about, the money is going to be there. And as far as membership, I think it's the same sort of thing. Build it and they'll come. Again, you do a good job on those other things, and yeah, it won't be the same kind of members. It'll be different, but people will be attracted to what they see, and so I think that last one is kind of to me a result of
everything else that we've been talking about.
Well, from your lips to God's ears. I mean, I hope and want to believe that that's right. I don't have enough experience in this congregation to have that confidence, but if that's true, I'm delighted.
The guy hiding back here in the booth, too, named Mark, needs a big hand because he's pretty much been running this place for the last 2 years.
When I think of all the conversation about not having enough help here and there, I agree with that totally. When Pastor O first came, he introduced us to gifts, and we had classes on people learning about, and we can learn about gifts because our gifts always change. But God has blessed us with gifts, and I honestly feel that when we were doing those classes, people recognized what their gifts were. And, some engineer was not going to sign up for Sunday school because it just doesn't work. It doesn't work if you are coerced or asked to do something. It doesn't work as well as if it's something that you have in your heart and you want it to do that. And God has put that in your heart. So thinking about our gifts and what we have as strengths, that's where we should.
I like that. And in other words, we're spending a lot of time identifying the church's needs. But another way of coming at the issue is for everybody to look into their own hearts and to say, what are my gifts and passions that I want to offer this church? Because I have a feeling that whatever they are, they're going to find a welcome home in the church. And becoming a little more articulate maybe about understanding your gifts and what you're called by God to do could be helpful in that. So thank you for that. Linda.
I want to follow up on Jill's comment and Burl's earlier because I think one of the things you may be experiencing, Pastor Luzer, in all of this is that, in fact, I think most of the rich elements of this community came about a bit in I wouldn't use necessarily the word ad hoc, but identifying the opportunity. I think Burl was like, oh, why don't we do that? Or someone thinking, why don't we do that? And Jill, I can remember that set of gift studies, and there were a bunch of things out of that where several people that I can think from that conversation said, oh, about something. You, Eric, and there were a whole bunch of people involved in that. I think the Carsons, just a bunch of people who then, oh, we could do that. Both inside and outside are bringing something from the outside in. Lois bringing and so forth, bringing Operation Blessings ideas to us. People bringing the builder-friendly kitchen things to us to say, look, this is something I value we should be doing. Now we have to say no to some of those things, or they may get said no to because just nobody's doing them. But I think it's one of our gifts as a congregation. We're probably not good at pairing them out or being honest about when our gifts have changed or our energy levels have changed.
Thank you. Alan. I want to try to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes, if I could, to honor everybody's time. But yes, Alan.
Dick Topping made me think of something. I've been a member here since '77. I'm looking around, there's been people that have been here longer than me. There was a time in this church when we put the bills on bulletin boards, and people in the congregation would take the bill and say, I can pay that because we're in such dire straits. So we've been there, but we've come a long way, and thank God.
Yeah, that's great. That's a wonderful history to have. Bonnie.
I'm not sure I should be the one to end this, because what I'm going to tell you
is that I've been a member here long enough to miss children's Christmas programs, to miss children's choirs, to miss a vibrant vacation Bible school, to miss Sunday school. And that went out the door, I don't know how many years ago now, 6 or 7, because we were told that that's not the way of the future. But looking around here, we're not the way of the future. Young families and their kids will be the way of the future. When I was growing up, and I think Jackie Carl can also remember a similar experience, we had youth group, and that was our social life. And all of our friends were there, and we went to everything together. We were a force to be reckoned with. We raked people's leaves. I even remember a recent time here in this church when we went to the Kleins and we raked their leaves in the fall. I don't think we can neglect the family and youth ministry any longer, unless we want to die. And I personally, I'm 80. I became 80. I don't feel old. I feel ready to keep going. And I love this church. I've been a member here since '79. I left for a time when my spiritual needs weren't being met. But I came back when I needed what was here and had come back again. And I'm so glad I did. And I'm so glad I'm still here and that I can look forward to worshiping here every Sunday morning. That's so precious to me. I don't want to lose that. I want that to keep going. Now, Laura and I worked at Vacation Bible School this summer. Jill was there, and Margreta was there, and we met some really adorable young people who got really turned on during that time. Maybe we weren't large in number, but we were big in spirit. And at least 2 of those young people, the Arrington's granddaughter, Precious Penny, and Nico, who's part of the Indonesian group, and who's the other one that was so turned on? Laura, I wish she were here. Molly. I never seen Molly so excited. Now, I was a teacher. Between full-time teaching and long-term subbing, it counted for over 40 years. Somehow that hasn't stopped for me. I brought out my puppet theater this summer. Some of you may remember the videos that we did at Christmas time during COVID to try to keep Sunday school alive. Well, all those puppets were generated by my middle schoolers in Durham. And we've converted them all to biblical characters. And they grow very well with that in mind. And I think one of the reasons the whale came up this morning was because of the garbage bag whale we created for the puppet theater that maybe George or Ellie remember. Anyway, I want to see those kids come back here. I want to see them be vibrant. Mark Belleville, are you still here? No. Well, I remember during one of our interims, we had a Christmas program that somehow we produced. Not we were involved. Leslie was here. She was involved. It was during Pastor George's tenure and Pastor Grace. Mark said, I don't think I've ever seen a Christmas program I liked better than this one. This was so enthusiastic. And I would like to see that come back. Didn't we all love that? Wasn't that a blessing? I'm a people this morning. I'm going to tell you something. I want to see our confirmation program emerge. And I'm going to volunteer right now as a mentor for one of the confirmations. Because it's got to be more than just the teachers. It's got to be people in the congregation supporting their faith experiences. And I really believe that. And I'd like you to think about, can you be a mentor to some young person? It doesn't even have to be this year's confirmand. It could be one coming up in the ranks, like 2 years away. I personally want them to come to Soup Kitchen, to Dover Friendly Kitchen, and help again like they used to. We have been dealing with COVID. I know that. We used to have greeters. You know we did. We used to have a vibrant culture. You know we did. But there are a lot of people who haven't come back, who were here every Sunday, but they haven't come back, but they're still alive and they're still out there. Where are you? Come back. We need you. We want to be a vibrant church. And that's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you, Bonnie.
Oh, I was going to give it to Pastor. I thought.
Yeah, unfortunately, my grandson has an important soccer game in Lancaster, Massachusetts. But I thank you for that, and the council and I are going to take all of this, and I hope that some people don't feel as able to speak out in public settings, and so if you want to send me an email, send your council emails or have a coffee with them and express your views, I welcome that. We welcome that. So this was very, very eye-opening for me, and I appreciate it, and I hope for you too. So why don't we close by saying our Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Go in peace to love